I'll tell you something funny about this collection. The first title was Too Jewish.
Oh my goodness, really?
Don't you think the stories are really too Jewish?
Shalom and welcome to the Two Jewish Radio Show with Rabbi Sam Kohan and friends, a weekly serving of everything Jewish. We'll have a great hour together today of news, music, comedy, and conversation. Our guest this morning is Richard Michelson, poet, award-winning children's book writer, and the author of the new volume of verse, Sleeping as Fast as I Can.
We are delighted to welcome back to Two Jewish, I don't want to say an old friend, a friend of long standing, Richard Michelson, a wonderful poet, an author of children's books, really a multi-talent who's had a wonderful gallery for a long time. His new book is called Sleeping as Fast as I Can, a new book of poetry. He has received a National Jewish Book Award, 2 Sidney Taylor Gold Medals from the Association of Jewish Library for his children's books, and served as the Poet Laureate of Northampton, Massachusetts. Good morning and welcome, Richard.
Good morning. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you again.
I have to say, I really enjoyed this new volume, and I'm going to jump right in because, in particular, I like Jewish. It's a very Jewish book, but I particularly like the Pesach poems. Can you tell us about the origins of those?
Sure. Well, it is probably my most, shall we say, my most Jewish collection of poetry.
Not too Jewish, though, of course.
It skirts there. You can't be too Jewish. But a couple of things. The fourth section, this book is really into 4 different sections. The first one is primarily has to do with Jewish history and today's politics. Then we have a section about my mom's descent into Alzheimer's and death, my dad's death. But the fourth section of the book is really a re-envisioning of the Passover Haggadah. I'm sorry that the book came out literally a week after Passover, so I didn't get to do the Passover reading tour. I'll have to do that next year. But it started in a few ways. There's a brand new anthology out that's called New Voices, and it actually came out by happenstance on the same day that my book came out, which also by happenstance was Yom HaShoah.
Wow.
And New Voices is an anthology of contemporary poets on the Holocaust, but it's different than most anthologies. They contacted a bunch of poets and gave us each a visual, which is included in the anthology, of various Holocaust imagery, and asked us to write to that. I got a picture of Eichmann's trial and the people who were watching, and kind of a jury, and I wrote a poem for that. About based on Passover, and about really it's called Prayer Before the Eating of the Koresh, and it's about the Passover sandwich, and it's also about how we stand between, say, as the last line says, the angel of all we will never know and the angel of all we must never forget. And that was this was a few years ago. That kind of kicked things off. I also started, every time I read the Haggadah every year, there are things I want to say to some of the poems that we read. And I wonder, for myself, I wonder if I would have had the courage to follow the Jews into the sea that it was going to part. And I wondered about those people who didn't have the courage and might have just stood on the shore watching. And that led to other things, the dipping of the herbs, the washing of the hands, and my thoughts about it. And the more I wrote, it just
became a whole sequence, didn't it? Yeah.
In a sense, I was following the order the Passover order and trying to give my own take on some of the things that we have been celebrating for millennials and millennials.
Is it all right if I read that prayer before the parting of the sea?
You're welcome to.
Let us praise those abandoned on the shore, unsure of the trick of their eyes, but knowing in their hearts that the waters will refuse to part. They are standing there still, calculating tides and measuring mud flats, their flow charts and bridges deserving no lesser suspension of disbelief. May we watch our brethren pass over daily, their encouragements drowned in the sound of the armies descending upon us. Death's certainty, too, is a kind of miracle.
Oh, that was lovely to hear in your voice. Thank you.
Well, no,
you have
it's
to come on a reading tour with me.
I'm happy to. I don't charge that much. We will return in just a few moments with Richard Michelson. His new book is called Sleeping as Fast as I Can, Poems. He's also a wonderful children's book author, gallery owner, a multi-talent. Let's call him a man of letters and images. When we spend more time with Richard Michelson, we come back in a moment here on Too Jewish. We welcome back to Too Jewish. Our guest this morning, Richard Michelson, is a poet, a children's book author of great distinction. His new book is called Sleeping as Fast as I Can, Poems. As you said, this is your most Jewish book of poetry. A lot of sadness, around your mother and some of the other aspects of it. Does poetry work better if there's some sadness involved?
Does poetry work better if there's some sadness involved? Well, I think when I'm really happy, I'm out enjoying the world, maybe, rather than
sitting around writing.
Yeah, rather than sitting at my desk, I'm in the sunshine or at the beach. But this book was written over the past 5 or 6 years. I know this is not a political show, but for me, it was difficult years, both publicly. I, have always had my anti-Semitic antenna up and, always warned my children this or that, but I was very much caught off guard by the spate of anti-Semitic incidents over the last few years, how it's grown, the hate speech. And then personally, my mother was also, as many people I'm sure have the same experience, descending into dementia. And I saw that the person who I knew was no longer the person that I knew, yet I still loved her greatly. And so, I started to think about our personalities and what it is that makes our personalities, to see, not to be able to have conversations with my mother that I used to see her, in a sense, become a child again. But at the same time, she seemed happier than she ever was in her life, which was not a particularly happy life. My dad was a victim of gun violence.
He was murdered.
Spent more than 40 years trying to champion the cause of gun safety, something that that I am definitely losing that battle. It seems to get worse and worse. But all these things conspired during the time I was writing. And while the book is certainly darker than my other books, I'm hoping that it still has a sense of humor, sometimes dark humor, but humor is historically the Jews' saving grace. And I couldn't write without that. So, I was watching my mother and trying to figure out who she was. I was watching the country, and I found that going back to the history of Judaism was what gave me courage and hope, because we have overcome so much. Obviously, this book was written as well during the pandemic years, and Jews were blamed early on for the Black Plague, for the plague of 1918. We were always accused. and oftentimes it did better than the general public, which because of the fact that Jews tended to live in close-knit communities, and also because you just mentioned Passover, they, unlike in the Middle Ages, would clean out their homes once a year. Kasher the homes, dust and leaven. So there's this long history, and it tied in with what we were living today, very much so. So all that kind of wove itself together and came out in this book of poems.
You wrote quite a bit after the Pittsburgh attack, the Tree of Life attack on the synagogue. There's a number of these poems kind of reflect on that and on violence. You always do so with a certain ironic flavor to it. Tell us about those poems.
Well, again, that was an eye-opener for me, as it was for many, the shooting in Pittsburgh. It was not an isolated incident by any means, but it certainly caught the imagination of many people. How do you write about tragedies like that? Certainly you don't want to use other people's tragedies to there's something about writing tragedies that makes me uncomfortable because I'm using other people's experience for my own purposes. On the other hand, how can we not address them? We have to address them. We have to get through them. We have to move through them. We can do that with empathy. We can do that with humor. We can do that with understanding. We can do that through politics. We have to face these things. We can't put them under the rugs. And I'm a poet, so the way I face life is through words. And words to me, you could, just the act of writing itself is an optimistic endeavor. If we didn't write, people write both for themselves but also for future generations. If we didn't think that there were going to be future generations, if we thought things were hopeless, it would be very difficult to put pen to paper. It's why that we can read poems that are even about a death in the family or mass murder, and while you're reading them, they can lift your heart. That's such an interesting thing to me, that we could read a book, say, that most people have read by Elie Wiesel, that is of the darkest subjects. Yet there's pleasure in the writing of it, in the way he's formed his sentences. It's just such an odd thing, and it's something that I also try to explore in my own work, which then becomes self-referential, and that alone has, a certain irony, but it's usually against myself.
So this is a worst question. What's your favorite poem in this collection?
My favorite poem in this collection tends to switch, as every time I do a reading, there's something else that comes out at me. I would say, among my favorite poems in this book are Neighborhood Villanelle, which is a poem about my own upbringing and my dad's death. I'm also particularly fond of, and I also read it a lot at readings because it's shorter than many of the poems.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. I remember reading Browning's Ring in the Book in college and thinking, you couldn't do this at a reading. It's an entire one long poem.
I'm partial to Angels with Guns Guarding the Gates of Heaven, which is about guns and my own synagogue here in Amherst,
right?
Which... during the debate of whether we start locking doors or leaving them open. I'm also partial to the Sestina. For those in your audience, I'll say very quickly, most of these poems are written in forms. the more
Right.
the more emotional a poem is to me in my own life. I find traditional forms help me. They give me that structure that I need so that I can work through an emotion. A sestina is a traditional poem of six stanzas of 6 lines each, where the last line repeats in a different order in every stanza. And I have a poem, Vermin, which brings together Einstein, Max Brod, Kafka, who's in many of my poems, Mozart, Hitler, and Trump's grandfather, all in a stew. So I'm proud of the way that poem worked together. A villanelle, a neighborhood villanelle, is a poem.
So would you favor us with Neighborhood Villanelle?
Yeah, sure. Did you want to read it, or would you like me to?
You wrote it. I'm happy to read it, but I think you should. This is so personal. I think it really should be you.
This is Neighborhood Villanelle. A villanelle is again a formal poem of stanzas,
So
3-line stanzas, where the last line repeats in the following stanza, and that continues. What most people are, I think, familiar with, Dylan Thomas, do not go gentle into that good night,
rage against the dying of the light. Yeah.
So that's the form. Neighborhood villanelle. In this neighborhood, you'd better learn to fight, my father says. Real schooling's from hard knocks. Books won't save your life. He knows I'd rather write and read. I don't talk back. His love is no birthright. Instead, I bluff, act tough. He teaches me to box. In this neighborhood, you'd better learn to fight, he says, or you'll be prey. Better tough Israelite than studious black hat, defenseless orthodox. Books won't save your life. I know you'd rather write. Next day was Hanukkah, the festival of lights. Hey, Jew boy, some kids jeered as if I wore earlocks. I was no Maccabee, bluff called, I could not fight. I came too battered, bruised, but had no appetite for bloodshed or revenge. Instead, I walked for blocks, prayed books would save my life. I swore someday I'd write these lines, and now I have. We never kissed goodnight, yet every poem I wrote, he saved. The paradox? A bullet stopped his life. Lead plug, he could not fight. I escaped the neighborhood with every word I write.
It's great. I want to thank Richard Michelson, who has definitely escaped the neighborhood. His new book is called Sleeping as Fast as I Can, Poems. Where can people go to find out more about you, to find out more about your children's books as well, your books on poetry?
Thank you. And I should say that since I'm speaking to your audience, I probably don't have to explain the title, but most people are familiar with the Yiddish proverb, sleep faster, we need the pillows.
Yes.
If you go to my site, which is richardmichelson.com, Richard, Michelson.com, you can read some poems, you can order some books, you can see my children's books. You can email me, say hello, tell me you heard me on this podcast. I would love to say hello to you. Other than that, your local bookstores, the evil Amazon, that's okay. If you buy it there, leave a review, and that will be your penance. So come see me, go to your bookstores, and buy poetry. Because it's
great
for me and my friends.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you so much.